10 regarding the Constitutional Convention. Senator David Norris, you have 10 minutes, Senator, to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I welcome the Minister to the House. The matter of debate in Seanad this evening concerns the highest office in the land, and therefore must be taken seriously and treated with respect. For some considerable time it had been recognised virtually universally that the process of nomination for the Presidency of Ireland is undemocratic and unfair, and is specifically and deliberately geared in favour of party candidates. Indeed, of the 9 presidents since the foundation of the state, not a single one has been fully independent of party affiliation, nor has any candidate won without the support of at least one of the major parties and its machinery. This is not in any sense to cast aspersions on the holders of that office. The Irish presidency is in fact one of those rare exceptions that proves the rule. In this case, the rule being the old legal precept that the fruit of a rotten tree must also be suspect. We can be justly proud of every single president this country has produced, from the first President Douglas Hyde in 1938 to the current incumbent. Indeed, the present holder of the office, President Michael D. Higgins, got off to a flying start with a clear and decisive result and has demonstrated remarkable dynamism and enthusiasm. His status has increased every day with every speech and every event he has graced with his presence. The Irish people could not have made a better choice, and I say that with the authority of someone who sought that office himself in the same election. I make this clear because I wish it to be understood in this matter that I have no personal axe to grind. Under no circumstances do I dispute the result of the presidential election, and I acknowledge fully that I entered this race knowing and accepting the prevailing conditions. But this does not mean that I have thereby forfeited the right to challenge those conditions, and throughout the presidential election I made it clear from the start that I had a concern about the nomination process, and with every day that passed, that concern increased. Moreover, this concern is virtually universally shared. This is shown by the reaction of the public and by the clear statement of every single major party in the state on an historical basis. So far there have been 9 presidents. The first president, Dr. Douglas Hyde, was installed by the political establishment without consultation of any kind with the Irish people. On no less than 6 occasions, no attempt was made to allow involvement of all the people of Ireland, i.e. in circumstances affecting 2/3 of the presidencies, the candidate was successful either by agreement between the parties, without an election, or by uncontested self-nomination. Prior to 2011, the last contested election was 1997, which meant that no one under 30 had any experience of a presidential election or had had the opportunity to vote in one. Had there not been an election in 2011, this would have increased to a situation where no one under 40 had had the opportunity to take part in the election of the first citizen of this state. And this nearly happened. It is widely known, and was reported generally in the press, that there were significant moves by the parties to avoid the expense of a presidential election and secure the nomination of an agreed candidate, thereby again bypassing the will of the people. A number of excellent and outstanding names were mentioned in this regard. Indeed, such efforts might well have been successful had I not intervened myself at an early stage and demonstrated that there was very considerable support among the electorate for someone with an independent background. During the 1990s, an all-party Oireachtas committee was established to review the Constitution, and among the elements to be considered was the office of President. I made a submission myself to this committee suggesting a reduction in the term of the presidency from 7 years to 5, on the basis that we had modelled our presidency in a number of regards on the French presidency, which country had already made such an amendment in relation to term of office. Before this matter was considered, there was a change of government, and almost inevitably the matter became a party political football. In 1997, Fine Gael deputies Jim O'Keefe and Paul McGrath initiated a bill entitled the 18th Amendment of the Constitution Bill 1997, which was presented to the Dáil on the 24th of September 1997. Under the 1937 Constitution, there are 2 methods of nomination to the office of Uachtaráin na hÉireann. 1, nomination by not less than 20 persons, each of whom is at the time a member of one of the houses of the Oireachtas, and 2, by the councils of not less than 4 administrative counties, including county boroughs as defined by law. Deputy O'Keefe and McGrath added a 3rd method. This was nomination by not less than 20,000 citizens, each of whom was entitled for the time being to vote in an election held under this article for such nomination to be made in a manner prescribed by law. In supporting the bill, Michael McDowell TD said that while the democratic legitimacy of the office was enhanced by the fact that the majority of people have the opportunity to vote, democratic legitimacy is circumscribed currently by a nominating procedure which is seriously restrictive. The bald fact is that not everyone can become president. Until this year, it had been in effect necessary for any prospective president to obtain the support of one of the 3 biggest political parties in the state. As a result, no previous election had more than 3 candidates and several had only 2. The candidates in contested elections were almost always party politicians and they were invariably men. It is clear that many people want to look beyond the political parties to find suitable candidates. He continued by remarking that it would be invidious and unacceptable if individuals were denied a nomination as a result of the nomination procedure which currently applies. There is a powerful argument for extending the nomination capacity. I can find no one who disagreed with this position. Brian Lennon, TD, did, however, express unease at the fact that Fine Gael was stealing a march on the Constitutional Review Committee by issuing a preemptive strike in the form of this bill. I took it that there was an all-party agreement on this subject, and that when the committee was re-established after the general election, that the all-party committee would look at the presidency and that a political party would not take unilateral or a stroke approach towards this question by introducing a measure in private members' time on the subject. I was very surprised to discover that our former chairperson of the committee is the deputy proposing this bill to amend the constitution. Thus, it is clear that the presidency and the question of the nomination procedures had become a political football between the 2 principal parties, and this is a matter of great regret. However, it is even more significant that despite this politicking, there was still unanimous agreement that the nomination procedures were too restrictive. It was pointed out that an opportunity did already exist through the county council route, whereby if one or more of the major parties abstained on a nomination to an independent, that person could secure a nomination. However, during my own attempts to gain a nomination, it was made clear to me in Longford County Council that Fine Gael had issued explicit instructions not only that they were to abstain, but they were to vote against me. I say this simply to illustrate the contrast between the theoretical and ethical position adopted by the parties and the pragmatic reality of the political practice. Doubts were also raised at this stage about the problematic nature of verifying the signatures of the then proposed 20,000 members of the public. However, recent years have seen extraordinary advances in the use of computer technology, and there is no doubt that this would now be a comparatively simple matter to secure. The bill was defeated. The matter returned for consideration to the All-Party Oireachtas Committee on the Constitution. This body published its 3rd progress report in 1998, and it is significant that it stated clearly, unambiguously and unanimously that the committee agrees with the Constitutional Review Group that the constitutional requirements for nominating a presidential candidate are too restrictive and in need of democratisation. It suggested a clear alteration to the nomination process. 1. The reduction from 20 to 10 members of the Oireachtas as nominators. 2. A provision for popular nomination. However, this entailed also continuing to bear in mind that the dignity of the office of President must be preserved against the possibility of frivolous or inadequately qualified candidates. Nevertheless, they made a recommendation that a figure of 10,000 would be appropriate as requiring widespread but at the same time achievable support for a candidacy. This takes into account the fact that the timescale for achieving this number is a mere 60 days. These recommendations have since lain dormant. During the election, I consistently raised this issue, and it met with a great deal of public support. Subsequent to the election, I considered introducing legislation, but on account of the technical difficulty that the Senate is precluded constitutionally from introducing a referendum bill, it was not possible for me to introduce this legislatively. However, on the 2nd of December 2011, Deputy Catherine Murphy introduced the 31st Amendment of the Constitution Bill 2011 in the Dáil, which would have addressed all these points, reducing the number of Oireachtas members necessary for nomination from 20 to 10, providing for a popular initiative of 10,000 citizens, and reducing the presidential term of office from 7 to 5 years, among other more technical matters, including amending a mistake in Article 12 of the Constitution with inappropriate reference to proportional representation. Once more, there was very considerable support, and the matter was argued very finely and with intellectual distinction, and a considerable degree of reference to constitutional authorities, such as the late Professor J.M. Kelly by Deputy Murphy, and she was supported by Deputy Barry Cowan from Fianna Fáil. Sinn Féin also gave general support to the bill. In response, the Minister for State, who is present here today, Deputy O'Dowd, appeared to express some qualified support, but queried the timing of the bill. He and other contributors appeared to believe that, despite the present process, everyone who had a serious interest in running was ultimately able, despite the nomination process, to get onto the ballot paper. This is incorrect. And the Minister's own brother withdrew from seeking a nomination, openly stating that, in his view, it was completely impossible for any independent to get elected because of the restrictions, including those on nomination. The nomination process itself is not the only disincentive. No one, for example, below a certain level of income or without the capacity to borrow massively is in a position to stand for this office. And this debars all but a tiny minority of our citizens from seeking the democratic right to stand for president. The current system of funding presidential campaigns requires all candidates or their parties to underwrite their own election expenses. One would have thought, given the extraordinary difficulties in securing a nomination, that it would be a legitimate expectation to have at least a reasonable proportion of election expenses covered by the state. The current quota necessary to trigger state support is clearly set on the basis that only party candidates would contest and that there would only be 2 or 3 candidates in the race. In a situation such as the last presidential election, where there were 7 candidates, it is mathematically obvious that the majority of those legitimately contesting the election will fail to secure any state assistance. This creates at the very least an unsustainable financial risk aimed at deterring the inclusion of ordinary citizens into what is seen as the private realm of the parties. All parties have been demonstrated to play politics with the presidency, and indeed during the last election it was widely stated by senior figures in Fine Gael that since they had never had the presidency, it was now their turn. My view is that this is essentially undemocratic. The presidency belongs to no party. It belongs always to the people. It is never the turn of any party, it is always the turn of the people. However, it is clear that the political establishment does not trust the people, at least in the matter of nomination, and believes this office should be kept to preserve the political elite. For the purpose of this debate, I am deliberately leaving to the side certain other factors that deterred independent candidates, in particular the attitude of the media. The discrimination against an independent candidate is highlighted when one considers the existing 2-tiered system of funding, which allows political parties to accept a maximum donation of €6,348 per annum from an individual, while an independent candidate can only accept €2,539. In addition, services provided at an election by an employee of a political party are deemed not to be nominations or benefits in kind, nor are election expenses incurred by a political party on behalf of a candidate at a presidential election so considered. This means, in effect, that once a party candidate has achieved a nomination, finance is automatically in place. Poster sites can be booked, material printed, while the independent candidate has merely a window of 30 days in which to achieve this impossible task. For an independent, prior to receiving a nomination, it is almost impossible to fundraise. Funders want to know that their candidates will be in the race. This means that for an independent, there is effectively only 1 month in which to fundraise. The length of time required for an independent candidate to acquire a nomination means that all services and materials are more expensive, as financial commitments cannot be negotiated until certainty exists. Thus, I think it clear that as all the parties have acknowledged the undemocratic and unfair nature of the nomination to the position of president, nevertheless, they have all shown an unwillingness to alter this, and they have also been party to the imposition of financial constraints to inhibit citizens of Ireland participating in one of the most serious constitutional exercises provided by the state. I believe this is a matter that must be rectified, and the motion we place before the House does so in a decent and dignified manner. The motion, I have just 2 sentences, I think. The motion suggests 2 alternatives which I think are very reasonable. One is for the Minister to bring a proposal to Government to implement the recommendations contained in the 1998 All-Party Report, or refer the recommendations to the Constitutional Convention. The Constitutional Convention has already been asked to consider the minor matter of the reduction of office of the President, and it would seem a quite extraordinary situation if the substantial issue, which is that of the nomination process and of the right and capacity of individual citizens to take part in this process, were avoided in the work of the Convention. This, in my opinion, seriously weakens the credibility of the Constitutional Convention in the same manner as the exclusion from consideration of reform of Seanad. Thank you very much.